With such peace, I only had time to think of the vampire's dark eyes, and then I fell into the deep sleep of exhaustion. By lunchtime the next day, I was in my folding aluminum chaise out in the front yard getting browner by the second. I was in my favorite white strapless two-piece, and it was a little roomier than last summer, so I was pleased as punch. Then I heard a vehicle coming down the drive, and Jason's black truck with its pink and aqua blazons pulled up to within a yard of my feet. Jason climbed down. Did I mention the truck sports those high tires? To stalk towards me. He was wearing his usual work clothes, a khaki shirt and pants, and he had a sheathed knife clipped to his belt, like most of the country road workers did. Just by the way he walked, I knew he was in a huff. I put my dark glasses on. "Why didn't you tell me you beat up the rat race last night?" My brother threw himself into the aluminum yard chair by my chaise. "Where's Gran?" he asked belatedly. "Hanging out the laundry," I said. Gran used the dryer in a pinch, but she really liked hanging the wet clothes out in the sun. Of course, the clothesline was in the backyard, where a clothesline should be. She's fixing country fried steak and sweet potatoes and green beans. And green beans she put up last year, for lunch, I added, knowing that would distract Jason a little bit. I hope Gran stayed out back. I didn't want her to hear this conversation. "Keep your voice low," I reminded him. Rene Lanier couldn't wait until I got to work this morning to tell me all about it. He was over to the Rat Race Trail last night to buy him some weed, and Denise drove up like she wanted to kill someone. Renee said he'd like to have gotten killed. She was so mad. It took both Renee and Denise to get Mac into the trailer, and then they took him to the hospital in Monroe. Jason glared at me accusingly. "Did Renee tell you that Mac came after me with a knife?" I asked, deciding attacking was the best way of handling this. I could tell Jason's pique was due in large part to the fact that he had heard about this from someone else. "If Denise told Renee, he didn't mention it to me," Jason said, and I saw his handsome face darken with rage. "He came after you with a knife?" "So I had to defend myself," I said, as if it were matter of fact. "And he took your chain." This was all true, if a little skewed. "I came in to tell you," I continued, "but by the time I got back into the bar, you were gone with Deanne, and since I was fine, it just didn't seem worth tracking you down. I knew you'd feel obligated to go after him if I told you about the knife," I added diplomatically. There was a lot more truth in that, since Jason dearly loves a fight. "What the hell were you doing out there anyway?" he asked, but he had relaxed, and I knew he was accepting this. "Did you know that, in addition to selling drugs, the rats are vampire drainers?" Now he was fascinated. "No. So?" "Well, one of my customers last night was a vampire, and they were draining him out in Merlotte's parking lot. I couldn't have that." "There's a vampire here in Bon Tom?" "Yep. Even if you don't want a vampire for your best friend, you can't let trash like the rats drain him. It's not like siphoning gas out of a car, and they would have left him out in the woods to die. Though the rats hadn't told me their intentions, that was my bet. Even if they put him under the covers so he could survive the day, the drained vampire took at least 20 years to recover. At least, that's what one had said on Oprah. And that's if another vampire took care of him." "The vampire was in the bar when I was there?" Jason asked. "Uh-huh. The dark-haired guy sitting with the rats." Jason grinned at my epithet for the rat race, but he didn't let go of the night before yet. "How'd you know he was a vampire?" he asked, but when he looked at me, I could tell he was wishing he had bitten his tongue. "I just knew," I said in my flattest tone. "Right." And we shared a whole unspoken conversation. "Homolka doesn't have a vampire," Jason said thoughtfully. He tilted his face back to catch the sun, and I knew we were off dangerous ground. "True," I agreed. Homolka was the town Bon Ton loved to hate. We'd been rivals in football, basketball, and historical significance for generations. "Neither does Rodale," Gran said from behind us, and Jason and I both jumped. I give Jason credit. He jumps up and gives Gran a hug every time he sees her. "Gran, you got enough food in the oven for me?" "You and 2 others," Gran said. Our grandmother smiled up at Jason. She was not blind to his faults, or mine, but she loved him. "I just got off a phone call with Everly Mason. She was telling me you hooked up with that Deanne last night." "Boy, oh boy, can't do anything in this town without getting caught," Jason said, but he wasn't really angry. "That Deanne," Gran said warningly as we all started into the house. "She's been pregnant one time I know of. You just take care she doesn't have one of yours. You'll be paying the rest of your life. Of course, that may be the only way I get great-grandchildren." Gran had the food ready on the table, so after Jason hung up his hat, we sat down and said grace. Then Gran and Jason began gossiping with each other, though they called it catching up, about people in our little town and parish. My brother worked for the state, supervising road crews. It seemed to me like Jason's day consisted of driving around in a state pickup, clocking off work, and then driving around all night in his own pickup. Renee was on one of the work crews Jason oversaw, and they'd been to high school together. They hung around with Hoyt, Foyt, and Barry a lot. "Sookie, I had to replace the hot water heater in the house," Jason said suddenly. He lives in my parents' old house, the one we'd been living in when they died in a flash flood. We lived with Gran after that, but when Jason got through his 2 years of college and went to work for the state, he moved back into the house, which on paper is half mine. "You need any money on that?" I asked. "No, I got it." We both make salaries, but we also have little income from a fund established when an oil well was sunk on my parents' property. It played out in a few years, but my parents and then Gran made sure the money was invested. It saved Jason and me a lot of struggle, that padding. I didn't know how Gran could have raised us if it hadn't been for that money. She was determined not to sell any land, but her own income is not much more than Social Security. That's one reason I don't get an apartment. If I get groceries when I'm living with her, that's reasonable to her. But if I buy groceries and bring them to her house and leave them on her table and go home to my house, that's charity, and that makes her mad. "What kind did you get?" I asked, just to show interest. He was dying to tell me. Jason's an appliance freak, and he wanted to describe his comparison shopping for a new water heater in detail. I listened with as much attention as I could muster, and then he interrupted himself. "Hey, Sook, you remember Maudette Pickens?" "Sure," I said, surprised. "We graduated in the same class." "Somebody killed Maudette in her apartment last night." Gran and I were riveted. "When?" Gran asked, puzzled that she hadn't heard already. "They just found her this very morning in her bedroom. Her boss tried to call her to find out why she hadn't shown up for work yesterday and today and got no answer, so he rode over and got the manager up and they unlocked the place. You know she had the apartment across from Deanne's?" Bontemps only had one bona fide apartment complex, a 3-building, 2-story U-shaped grouping, so we knew exactly where he meant. "She got killed there?" I felt ill. I remembered Maudette clearly. Maudette had a heavy jaw and a square bottom, pretty black hair, and husky shoulders. Maudette had been a plotter, never bright or ambitious. I thought I recalled her working at the Grab It Quick, a gas station / convenience store. "Yeah, she'd been working there for at least a year, I guess," Jason confirmed. "How was it done?" My grandmother had that scorched, give-it-to-me quick look, with which nice people ask for bad news. "She had some vampire bites on her, inner thighs," my brother said, looking down at his plate. "But that wasn't what killed her. She was strangled. Deanne told me Maudette liked to go to that vampire bar in Shreveport when she had a couple days off, so maybe that's where she got the bites. Might not have been Sookie's vampire." "Maudette was a fangbanger?" I felt queasy, imagining slow, chunky Maudette draped in the exotic black dress fangbangers often affected. "What's that?" asked Gran. She must have missed Sally Jesse the day the phenomenon was explored. Whose voice is this? "Men and women that hang around with vampires and enjoy being bitten. Vampire groupies. They don't last too long, I think, because they want to be bitten too much, and sooner or later they get that one bite too many." "But a bite didn't kill Maudette." Gran wanted to be sure she had it straight. "Nope, strangling." Jason had begun finishing his lunch. "Don't you always get gas at the Grab It?" I asked. "Sure, so do a lot of people." "And didn't you hang around with Maudette some?" Gran asked. Well, in a way of speaking," Jason said cautiously. I took that to mean he'd betted Maudette when he couldn't find anyone else. "I hope the sheriff doesn't want to talk to you," Gran said, shaking her head as if indicating no would make it less likely. "What?" Jason was turning red, looking defensive. "That's all."